In the vast tapestry of the galaxy, where 1,000 species flourish under distant suns, there exists an unspoken truth that chills the hearts of even the mightiest civilizations. Some battles are too dangerous to fight, some enemies too powerful to face, and some calls for help too costly to answer. When the Zephyrian Queen's desperate plea echoed across the galactic communication networks, reaching every corner of known space, the silence that followed was deafening. The Karathi Empire, with their billion-strong fleets, claimed technical difficulties. The crystalline beings of Nexus Prime suddenly discovered urgent maintenance schedules. The warrior clans of Veltar, who had never backed down from any fight in their 1,000-year history, found themselves inexplicably tied up in internal matters. One by one, every major power, every alliance, every species that prided itself on honor and strength, found reasons to look away. The Queen's call grew more desperate with each passing day, her voice breaking as she described the approaching darkness that would consume not just her world, but potentially spread like a plague across the galaxy. But humanity had always been different. Perhaps it was their stubborn nature, or their tendency to rush headfirst into impossible situations. Maybe it was their strange habit of caring about people they'd never met, or their belief that sometimes doing the right thing mattered more than doing the smart thing. When Marcus Kane, a human warrior whose own people had branded him reckless and whose military superiors had deemed him unemployable, heard the Queen's final transmission, he didn't think about odds or politics or the wisdom of getting involved. He simply strapped on his armor, powered up his ship, and headed toward a world he'd never seen to help a people he'd never met. What happened next would shake the foundations of galactic civilization and prove once again that humanity's greatest strength has always been their refusal to abandon hope when everyone else has given up. This is the story of how one human's answer to an impossible call changed everything. Marcus Kane sat in the dimly lit corner of Stellar Station 7's cantina, nursing a drink that tasted like recycled starship fuel and regret. The ambient noise of a dozen different species chattering, arguing, and conducting business washed over him like white noise. 3 months had passed since his discharge from the Terran Defense Force, and the bitter taste of that final meeting with his commanding officers still lingered stronger than the alcohol. Reckless, they had called him. A liability to his team and the mission. The words echoed in his mind as he watched the holographic displays showing news feeds from across the galaxy. Apparently, saving an entire colony ship by disobeying direct orders wasn't enough to outweigh the paperwork headache it had caused. The cantina fell unusually quiet, and Marcus looked up to see every patron's attention drawn to the main holographic display. A figure materialized in the blue-tinged light, and gasps rippled through the crowd. Queen Lyralii of Zephyr Prime stood before them, her usually immaculate appearance disheveled, her silver hair falling in loose strands around her elegant features. But it was her eyes that captured Marcus's attention, eyes that held the weight of impending doom. People of the galaxy, the Queen's voice carried a tremor that spoke of sleepless nights and growing desperation. I come before you not as a ruler seeking political alliance, but as a being facing extinction. For 72 days, our automated distress signals have reached every corner of known space. We have received no response. Marcus leaned forward, his drink forgotten. Around him, aliens of various species shifted uncomfortably, some looking away from the display entirely. The entity we call the Void Swarm approaches Zephyr Prime with each passing hour, Queen Lyralii continued. Our greatest scientists estimate we have perhaps 10 days before it reaches our world. This is not merely a threat to my people. Every projection indicates that once the swarm consumes our planet's unique energy matrix, it will gain enough power to spread across neighboring systems at an exponential rate. A Karathi general at a nearby table stood abruptly and left, his scaled features twisted in what might have been shame. Marcus noticed similar reactions throughout the cantina as various species found sudden reasons to be elsewhere. I am not asking for a fleet, the Queen's voice grew more urgent. I am not requesting territorial concessions or trade agreements. I am begging for a single ship, a single warrior willing to help us activate the ancient defense systems our ancestors left behind. The process requires someone capable of surviving the neural link with technology beyond our current understanding. Our own people cannot withstand the strain, but perhaps someone from another species. The transmission flickered, and, when it stabilized, tears glistened on the Queen's cheeks. We have children here. Families. Dreams and hopes for the future. If there is anyone listening who believes that some things are worth fighting for, please. We are running out of time. The hologram faded, leaving the cantina in stunned silence. Then, as if a spell had been broken, conversation resumed, but it carried a forced quality. Marcus heard snippets of discussion about trade routes that might be affected, speculation about political ramifications, and careful analyses of why getting involved would be strategically inadvisable. Nobody talked about children who would die if the Queen's world fell. Marcus finished his drink in one burning gulp and stood. As he made his way toward the exit, he overheard a conversation between two Nexus Prime delegates. Tragic situation, really, one crystalline being hummed to another. But, our resources are committed to the mining expedition in the Outer Rim. Quite right, the other agreed. Besides, if this void swarm is truly as dangerous as she claims, sending ships would merely add to the casualties. Marcus paused at their table. Or it might save an entire species. The first delegate's crystalline form pulsed with what Marcus had learned was equivalent to a dismissive laugh. Human, I appreciate your species' tendency toward heroic gestures, but this is a matter for careful consideration. One cannot simply rush into unknown situations without proper analysis. Sometimes analysis is just an excuse for inaction, Marcus replied. The second delegate leaned forward. And, sometimes heroic impulses lead to unnecessary deaths. Your own military record suggests you understand this principle, does it not, former Lieutenant Kane? Marcus felt his jaw clench. News traveled fast in galactic circles, apparently. My record shows that sometimes the right choice isn't the safe choice. Indeed, the first delegate hummed. Which is precisely why you're drinking alone in a cantina instead of leading troops. Rather than respond, Marcus simply nodded curtly and continued toward the exit. The delegate's laughter followed him, a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. The corridor outside the cantina was quieter, filled mostly with the steady hum of the station's life support systems. Marcus walked aimlessly, his mind churning. He'd spent 3 months trying to figure out what came next, or a discharged soldier with a reputation for insubordination could find purpose. Now he knew. His personal quarters on the station were spartanly furnished, containing little beyond a bed, a desk, and a storage locker holding his few possessions. Marcus went directly to the locker and pulled out a sealed case. Inside, his personal combat armor gleamed under the room's harsh lighting. The suit was a hybrid of Terran technology and modifications he'd acquired over years of combat, painted in the deep blue of the Terran Defense Force with personal additions that made it uniquely his. As he ran his fingers over the familiar contours, Marcus thought about the Queen's words. A single warrior. Someone capable of surviving a neural link with ancient technology. He'd undergone neural interface training during his military service, and his psychological profiles indicated an unusually high tolerance for technological integration. Whether that would be enough remained to be seen. His communication console chimed, displaying an incoming message from his younger sister Sarah back on Earth. Marcus hesitated, then activated the display. Sarah's face appeared, her expression concerned. Marcus, I saw the news feeds about that alien Queen's plea. Please tell me you're not thinking about doing something stupid. Despite everything, Marcus smiled. Sarah knew him too well. Define stupid. You know exactly what I mean. Flying off alone to fight some cosmic horror that has the entire galaxy running scared. Sarah's voice carried the mixture of exasperation and affection that only siblings could manage. Come home, Marcus. Mom and Dad have a spot ready for you on the farm. You can start over here. Start over as what? A farmer? Marcus shook his head. Sarah, I appreciate the offer, but that's not who I am. It's who you could be, she insisted. It's safe here. Quiet. You could have a normal life. Normal. Marcus repeated the word as if tasting something foreign. The Queen has children on her world, Sarah. Families who want nothing more than a normal life. If I can help them have that chance. It's not your responsibility. Sarah's voice rose with frustration. You can't save everyone, Marcus. You've been trying your whole life, and look where it's gotten you. Discharged, alone, drinking in some space station bar. The words stung because they carried truth. Maybe. But if I don't try, who will? Sarah's expression softened. Someone else. There has to be someone else. But there isn't, Marcus said quietly. That's the point. Everyone else is looking for reasons why it's not their problem. Someone has to be willing to step up when no one else will. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other across the vast distance of space. Finally, Sarah sighed. You're going to do this regardless of what I say, aren't you? Yeah. I am. Then, promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll come home. Marcus wanted to make that promise. Every fiber of his being wanted to give his sister the reassurance she needed. But, he'd learned long ago that some promises couldn't be kept, no matter how much you wanted to honor them. I promise I'll do my best to come home, he said instead. Sarah nodded, understanding the distinction. I love you, you stubborn idiot. Love you too. After ending the call, Marcus stood in silence for several minutes. Then, he began the familiar ritual of donning his armor. Each piece locked into place with satisfying clicks, the suit's systems coming online and interfacing with his neural implants. The heads-up display flickered to life, showing system status, environmental readings, and a dozen other data streams he'd learned to interpret instinctively. His ship waited in Docking Bay 12, a modified Terran corvette he'd purchased with his military pension. The Resilient wasn't the newest or fastest ship in the fleet, but she was reliable and had been modified for single-pilot operation. More importantly, she was his. As Marcus made his way through the station's corridors, he noticed the reactions of other beings. Some nodded respectfully upon seeing his armor, recognizing the bearing of a professional soldier. Others gave him a wide berth, perhaps sensing his destination. Word traveled fast on stations like this, and his conversation with the Nexus Prime delegates had likely been overheard. The docking bay hummed with activity as ships of various sizes and configurations prepared for departure. Marcus approached the Resilient's boarding ramp, then paused as a voice called out behind him. Going somewhere, human? Marcus turned to see Captain Threll of the Veltar warrior clans approaching. The massive, reptilian being's scarred features bore an expression that might have been respect. Zephyr Prime, Marcus replied simply. Threll's head tilted in a gesture Marcus recognized as acknowledgement. I heard the Queen's call. My clan elders deemed it too risky to answer. And, you agree with them? I agree with my duty to my clan, Threll said carefully. But, I also understand duty to something larger than oneself. Marcus studied the warrior's face, seeing something familiar in the alien's eyes. You want to come with me? I cannot. But, I can do this. Threll produced a small device from his belt. Veltar battle stims. They will enhance your reflexes and endurance when the time comes. Use them wisely. Marcus accepted the gift, understanding the significance. Among the Veltar, sharing battle stims with a non-clan member was a gesture of profound respect. Thank you. Bring honor to the warrior's path, Threll said formally. As Marcus boarded the Resilient and began pre-flight preparations, he reflected on the strangeness of the situation. Here he was, a disgraced human soldier preparing to answer a plea for help that the galaxy's greatest powers had ignored. It should have felt foolish, even suicidal. Instead, it felt like the first right thing he'd done in months. The Resilient's engines hummed to life, and Marcus felt the familiar vibration through the ship's hull. Station Control acknowledged his departure request, and, within minutes, he was clear of the station and setting course for Zephyr Prime. According to his navigation computer, the journey would take 6 days at maximum burn. 6 days to figure out how one human warrior might make a difference against a threat that had an entire galaxy running scared. As the stars elongated into lines and the ship entered hyperspace, Marcus opened a channel to record a personal log. Personal log, Marcus Kane, Day 1 en route to Zephyr Prime. I'm not sure what I'll find when I get there, or if I'll be able to help. But, I know one thing for certain, when someone calls for help, you answer. That's what separates us from the darkness. He paused the recording and settled back in the pilot's seat. Ahead lay the unknown, but Marcus Kane had never been one to let uncertainty stop him from doing what needed to be done. The Queen's call had been heard by millions across the galaxy. Only one had chosen to respond. The Resilient flew on through the void, carrying humanity's answer toward a dying world. 5 days into his journey toward Zephyr Prime, Marcus Kane received his first glimpse of the threat that had driven the galaxy's most powerful civilizations into hiding. The Resilient's long-range sensors detected an anomaly approximately 2 light-years from his destination, something that defied conventional understanding of physics and spacetime. The Void Swarm appeared on his displays as a writhing mass of absolute darkness, a region where light itself seemed to be consumed rather than reflected or absorbed. It moved through space like a living thing, tendrils of nothingness reaching out to probe nearby stellar phenomena. Where these tendrils touched matter, that matter simply ceased to exist, leaving behind regions of space that registered as complete voids on every scanner. Marcus had seen recordings of many cosmic phenomena during his military service, from neutron star collisions to the birth of new solar systems. Nothing had prepared him for the sight of something that seemed to actively devour reality itself. "Ship's log, supplemental," he recorded, his voice tight with controlled tension. Visual confirmation of the entity designated as the Void Swarm. Current distance from Zephyr Prime approximately 48 hours at its present velocity. Whatever this thing is, it's unlike anything in our databases. Forwarding sensor data to Terran Command and Galactic databases, though I doubt this information will reach them in time to matter. The remainder of his journey passed in tense preparation. Marcus reviewed everything he could find about Zephyr Prime and its inhabitants, a peaceful species known for their advanced biotechnology and philosophical approach to science. The Zephyrians had never been warriors, preferring to solve conflicts through diplomacy and mutual understanding. Their pacifist nature had served them well for centuries, earning them respect and protection from more militaristic species. Now that same peaceful nature might doom them. When the Resilient finally dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyr system, Marcus was struck by the beauty of what he had come to protect. Zephyr Prime hung like a jewel against the void, its surface a swirling pattern of blues and greens broken by silver cities that gleamed like scattered diamonds. 3 small moons orbited the planet, each one home to research stations and artistic colonies that represented the pinnacle of Zephyrian achievement. The beauty was marred by signs of desperate preparation. Orbital defense platforms, hastily constructed and clearly inadequate for their intended purpose, dotted the space around the planet. Ships of various sizes fled the system in a steady stream, carrying those Zephyrians who had chosen evacuation over standing their ground. Marcus opened a communication channel. "Zephyr Prime Control, this is Marcus Kane aboard the Terran vessel Resilient. I'm responding to Queen Lyraliai's call for assistance." The response came immediately, the relief in the voice palpable. "Resilient, this is Controller Neveth. We honestly didn't expect anyone to answer. Please stand by for priority docking instructions." As the Resilient approached the planet's primary orbital station, Marcus got his first close look at the Zephyrians themselves. They were tall, slender beings with skin that held a subtle luminescence, as if lit from within. Their features were delicate but expressive, and their movements carried a natural grace that spoke of a species that had evolved in harmony with their environment rather than in conflict with it. The docking bay assigned to him was clearly designed for much larger vessels, emphasizing the desperate nature of the situation. As Marcus disembarked, a small group of Zephyrians approached, led by a female whose bearing suggested authority despite her obvious exhaustion. "Commander Kane," she said, her voice carrying the musical quality typical of her species. "I am Minister Valandra, the Queen's senior advisor. Her Majesty is waiting for you in the council chambers. If you would follow me?" The journey through the orbital station revealed the full scope of Zephyrian desperation. Corridors that should have been filled with the peaceful activities of daily life now bustled with evacuation preparations. Families huddled together near transport bays, their few possessions packed into whatever containers they could find. Children clung to parents who tried to maintain calm expressions while fear flickered in their luminescent eyes. Marcus had seen evacuation scenarios before, but those had been military operations conducted under controlled conditions. This was something else entirely, an entire civilization facing extinction, holding on to hope by the thinnest of threads. The council chambers occupied the station's central section, a circular room with walls that displayed real-time views of space around the planet. The effect was both beautiful and deeply unsettling, as one section of the wall showed the approaching darkness of the Void Swarm. Queen Lyralii stood at the chamber's center, surrounded by advisors and, what Marcus assumed were the planet's leading scientists. In person, she was even more striking than her holographic image had suggested, possessing an ethereal quality that seemed almost otherworldly. But it was her eyes that captured his attention, eyes that held depths of wisdom and sorrow that spoke of impossible choices and desperate hopes. "Commander Kane," the Queen said, moving toward him with outstretched hands in a gesture of welcome. "You came. After all the silence, after all the refusals, you actually came." "Yes, Your Majesty," Marcus replied, accepting the formal greeting. "Though I should point out that I'm no longer an active commander. I'm just one person with a ship and a willingness to help." "Sometimes," the Queen said softly, "one person willing to help is worth more than armies that stand aside." Minister Valandra activated a holographic display in the chamber's center, showing a three-dimensional representation of Zephyr Prime and the approaching threat. "The Void Swarm will reach our outer defense perimeter in approximately 36 hours, she explained. "Our orbital platforms will engage it, but our projections indicate they will last no more than minutes against its advance." An elderly Zephyrian scientist stepped forward. "I am Chief Researcher Kolseth. Commander Kane, what the Queen told you about our ancient defense systems is accurate, but the reality is more complex than we initially conveyed. The system was designed by our ancestors during a period of galactic conflict millennia ago, then sealed away when peace was achieved." Kolseth manipulated the display, revealing a network of structures beneath the planet's surface. The defense network extends throughout Zephyr Prime's core, tapping directly into our world's unique energy matrix. When activated, it can project barriers of pure force that should, in theory, be capable of repelling even the Void Swarm. "In theory," Marcus repeated. "What about in practice?" The scientist's expression grew grave. "The system requires a neural interface with technology that is beyond our current understanding. Our ancestors designed it to be operated by beings with specific neural characteristics that our species no longer possesses. The evolutionary changes that made us a peaceful people also made us incompatible with our own defense systems." Queen Lyralii moved to stand beside the holographic display. "Our research suggests that certain other species might possess the neural flexibility required for the interface. Humans, in particular, show promise due to your species' adaptability and neural plasticity." "Show promise," Marcus said. "But you don't know for certain." "No," the Queen admitted. "We don't. The interface process is potentially lethal. Previous attempts by our own people resulted in neural burnout and death. We cannot guarantee your survival." Marcus studied the display, watching the slow but steady approach of the Void Swarm. Around him, Zephyrian advisors waited in tense silence. These people were facing the extinction of their entire civilization, and their only hope rested on the willingness of a stranger to risk his life on an untested theory. "What would the process involve?" he asked. Kolseth activated another section of the display, showing the interior of a vast chamber deep beneath the planet's surface. The interface chamber is located at the center of the defense network, accessible only through a series of ancient transport systems. You would need to establish a direct neural connection with the primary control matrix, a process that involves complete integration with technology that operates on principles we barely comprehend. "And if it works?" "If it works," Queen Lyralii said, her voice carrying the first note of hope Marcus had heard from her, "the defense grid will activate and protect our world. If it doesn't work, I die, and your world still falls to the Void Swarm." "Yes." Marcus walked around the holographic display, studying it from different angles. The chamber containing the interface looked ancient beyond measure, its walls covered in symbols that seemed to shift and flow even in the static representation. The technology visible in the scans was clearly far advanced beyond anything in current galactic civilization. "Commander," Minister Valandra said quietly, "we understand what we're asking of you. No one would blame you if you chose to leave. You've already done more than anyone else was willing to do by simply coming here." Marcus thought about the children he'd seen in the corridors, about the families preparing for evacuation with nowhere safe to go. He thought about his sister's words about starting a normal life on Earth, about the Nexus Prime delegates who had dismissed heroic gestures as pointless, about the Veltar warrior who had wanted to come but couldn't abandon his duty to his clan. I didn't come here to run away, he said finally. How soon can we begin? The relief that washed over the assembled Zephyrians was palpable, but it was tempered with obvious guilt at accepting such a sacrifice from a stranger. Queen Lyralii stepped forward, her luminescent skin brightening with emotion. Are you certain, Commander? There are no guarantees, no safe options if the interface fails. Your Majesty, Marcus replied, there are children on this world who deserve a chance to grow up. Families who deserve a future. Sometimes the choice isn't between safe and dangerous, it's between trying and giving up. I've never been good at giving up. Chief Researcher Kolseth activated his portable scanner, running it over Marcus's neural implants. These military-grade enhancement interfaces will actually improve your chances, he said with growing excitement. They should provide some protection against neural feedback. But we'll need to begin immediately. The process of accessing the interface chamber will take several hours, and we must complete the activation before the Void Swarm reaches our defense perimeter. Queen Lyralii placed her hands on Marcus's shoulders, a gesture of profound gratitude in Zephyrian culture. If you succeed, our people will remember your name for all generations. If you fail. If I fail, Marcus said, at least your people will know that someone tried. The preparation process began immediately. Marcus was escorted to a medical facility where Zephyrian doctors ran comprehensive scans of his neural system, mapping the pathways that would interface with the ancient technology. The process was fascinating from a technical standpoint, but Marcus found his attention drawn repeatedly to the windows that showed the approaching darkness. Dr. Lysera, the lead medical officer, explained the modifications that would be made to his neural implants. We're essentially creating bridge protocols between your human neural patterns and the interface requirements. The process is untested, and we cannot predict all possible side effects. What are the known side effects? Marcus asked. Neural overload leading to brain death, she replied with clinical honesty. Complete personality dissolution. Physical transformation at the cellular level. Memory loss. Enhanced psychic sensitivity that could result in madness. Those are just the possibilities we've identified through theoretical modeling. Marcus considered this list of potential fates. And if I don't try? Dr. Lysera gestured toward the window where the Void Swarm was now visible as a dark stain against the stars. Then, none of it matters anyway. The medical modifications took 6 hours to complete, during which Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness as the Zephyrian doctors carefully adjusted his neural implants. In his dreams, he found himself standing in vast chambers filled with technology that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Voices spoke to him in languages that predated known civilization, offering warnings and encouragement in equal measure. When he finally awoke, the world looked different. Colors seemed more vivid, and he could sense electromagnetic patterns in the station's systems. The neural modifications had heightened his perceptions in ways he hadn't anticipated. How do you feel? Dr. Lysera asked, monitoring his vital signs with obvious concern. Different, Marcus replied honestly. But functional. Queen Lyralii entered the medical bay, her expression grave. Commander, the Void Swarm has accelerated. We now estimate contact with our outer defenses in 18 hours. If we're going to attempt this, it must be now. Marcus sat up, testing his balance as his enhanced neural systems adjusted to their new configuration. Everything felt more intense, more immediate. He could sense the electronic patterns of every device in the room, feel the emotional resonance of the Zephyrians around him. I'm ready, he said, surprised to find that it was true. The journey to the planet's surface took place aboard a heavily shielded transport designed for deep subsurface exploration. As they descended through Zephyr Prime's atmosphere, Marcus got his first real look at the world he was trying to save. The surface was a masterwork of biotechnology and natural harmony, with cities that seemed to grow from the landscape rather than being imposed upon it. The entrance to the ancient defense network was located in a remote mountain range, hidden beneath structures that had been sealed for thousands of years. As the transport landed near the entrance, Marcus could feel something stirring in the depths below, as if his modified neural patterns had awakened systems that had slept for millennia. From here, Chief Researcher Kolseth explained, you'll descend alone. The ancient transport systems will only respond to the designated interface subject. We'll monitor your progress as long as our sensors can penetrate the depths, but, beyond a certain point, you'll be on your own. Marcus checked his equipment one final time, ensuring his armor systems were fully charged and operational. The Veltar battle stims Captain Threll had given him were secured in an easily accessible compartment, ready for use when the time came. Queen Lyralii approached him at the entrance to the underground complex. "Commander Kane, before you enter, I need you to understand something. If the interface succeeds, you'll become something more than human. The ancient technology doesn't just use its operator, it transforms them into something capable of managing power beyond imagination. You may emerge from this changed in ways we cannot predict." Marcus considered this final warning. Everything he'd planned to become, might be lost in the depths below. But, above them, the Void Swarm continued its relentless approach toward a world filled with innocent lives. "Sometimes," he said, echoing words his grandfather had spoken long ago, "you have to be willing to lose yourself to save others." With that, Marcus Kane stepped into the ancient tunnels that led toward the heart of Zephyr Prime's defense network. Behind him, Queen Lyralii and her people watched until the darkness swallowed him completely. The real test was about to begin. The ancient transport system that carried Marcus deeper into Zephyr Prime defied every principle of physics he understood. The platform he stood on moved through tunnels carved from what appeared to be solid crystal, but the walls themselves seemed to pulse with inner light that responded to his presence. As his modified neural implants interfaced with the transport's guidance systems, he began to comprehend that he was traveling not just through physical space, but through layers of reality itself. The descent took nearly 2 hours, during which Marcus passed through chambers that contained technology beyond current galactic understanding. Massive crystalline structures hummed with dormant power, their surfaces covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when he wasn't looking directly at them. At one point, the transport passed through what his sensors registered as solid matter, confirming that the ancient builders had mastered dimensional manipulation on a scale that made current technology seem primitive. "Fascinating," he murmured into his suit's recorder. The Zephyrians' ancestors weren't just advanced, they existed on a completely different technological paradigm. This isn't just alien technology, it's technology that operates according to different universal laws. As the transport finally came to rest, Marcus found himself standing before the entrance to the interface chamber. The doorway was easily 3 times his height and carved from a single piece of what appeared to be crystallized space itself. When he approached, the massive doors responded to his neural signature and slid open with a sound like distant thunder. The chamber beyond took his breath away. The space was vast beyond comprehension, its walls curving upward into darkness that his armor's lights couldn't penetrate. But it was the center of the chamber that commanded attention. A sphere of pure energy hung suspended in mid-air, surrounded by concentric rings of crystalline technology that rotated slowly around it. The entire assembly pulsed with power that Marcus could feel in his bones, a rhythm that matched the planet's geological heartbeat. As he stepped into the chamber, holographic displays materialized around him, showing information in languages that predated known civilization. But, somehow, through his modified neural implants, he could understand fragments of the message. The ancient builders had indeed created this system as a last resort, a weapon of such power that it could reshape reality itself within a planetary radius. "Surface team," Marcus spoke into his communicator, though he wasn't certain the signal would penetrate this deep. "I've reached the interface chamber. Beginning approach to the central matrix." The response came back faint but audible. "We copy, Commander. Void Swarm contact with outer defense grid in 12 hours and counting. Proceed when ready." Marcus approached the central sphere, feeling his neural implants begin to resonate with the ancient technology. The interface process would require direct physical contact with the energy matrix, allowing the system to map his neural patterns and integrate them with its own consciousness. Dr. Lysera had warned him that the process would likely be agonizing, assuming it didn't kill him outright. Before beginning, he activated the Veltar battle stims Captain Threll had given him. The enhancement drugs flooded his system with heightened reflexes and pain tolerance, changes he hoped would help him survive the neural integration. As the stims took effect, the world around him sharpened to crystalline clarity. "Personal log," he recorded, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to attempt. This is probably my last entry. If anyone finds this record, know that I came here voluntarily. The people of Zephyr Prime deserve a chance to survive, and sometimes sacrifice is the price of giving others hope. He paused the recording and stepped toward the sphere. As his armored hand approached the energy matrix, tendrils of pure force reached out to meet him, passing through his armor as if it didn't exist and making contact with his skin. The sensation was indescribable, like touching the fundamental forces that held the universe together. Then, the interface began. Pain beyond description flooded through Marcus's neural pathways as the ancient system invaded his mind. He felt his consciousness being mapped, analyzed, and judged by intelligence that had existed since the dawn of galactic civilization. Images flashed through his awareness, the builders themselves, beings of such advanced evolution that they existed partially outside normal spacetime, their desperate war against entities that consumed reality itself, the sacrifices they had made to create weapons capable of standing against the darkness. The system spoke to him in concepts rather than words, downloading eons of knowledge directly into his brain. He learned that the Void Swarm was not unique, that similar entities had plagued the galaxy for millions of years, consuming entire star systems and leaving nothing behind but empty space. The ancient defense networks had been built not just to protect individual worlds, but to serve as anchor points for reality itself. As the integration deepened, Marcus felt his human consciousness beginning to expand beyond its normal limitations. He became aware of quantum fluctuations at the molecular level, could sense the gravitational patterns of the planet around him, felt the life force of every being on Zephyr Prime as distinct points of warmth in the cold void. The transformation was overwhelming, but he held on to his core sense of purpose: protect the innocent. Then, the system began testing his worthiness. Marcus found himself experiencing every moment of violence in his military career, feeling not just his own perspective but that of everyone affected by his actions. He relived the colony ship incident that had led to his discharge, seeing how his disobedience of orders had saved 3,000 lives while creating political complications that his superiors couldn't overlook. The ancient intelligence weighed his choices, measuring not just their outcomes but the intentions behind them. The test expanded beyond his own experiences. He felt the weight of humanity's entire history, their wars and their compassion, their capacity for destruction and their stubborn refusal to abandon hope. The system evaluated his entire species through his neural patterns, determining whether humans possessed the necessary qualities to wield power beyond imagination. Through it all, Marcus maintained focus on a single image: the Zephyrian children he had seen in the orbital station corridors, their luminescent eyes filled with fear and hope in equal measure. Whatever price the interface demanded, whatever transformation it required, those children deserved a chance to grow up in a universe where darkness could be held at bay. The ancient intelligence seemed satisfied with what it found in his mind. The integration process shifted from interrogation to instruction, as the system began teaching him how to control the planet's defense network. The knowledge flowed into him like a river of liquid fire, burning away his human limitations and replacing them with understanding that transcended normal consciousness. He learned to perceive the quantum foam that underlied reality, to manipulate the fundamental forces that bound atoms together. The defense system's operation required directing energy flows that could reshape matter at the subatomic level, creating barriers that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. No ordinary mind could contain such knowledge, but Marcus was no longer ordinary. The transformation was excruciating but also exhilarating. He felt his consciousness expanding to encompass the entire planetary defense grid, his awareness stretching through crystalline conduits that ran through Zephyr Prime's core. Every sensor, every weapon, every shield generator became an extension of his enhanced nervous system. Above him, he sensed the Void Swarm's approach accelerating. The entity had detected the awakening of the defense network and was moving to attack before the system could reach full power. Marcus had perhaps 6 hours to master capabilities that the ancient builders had spent lifetimes developing. "Surface team," he spoke, his voice now carrying harmonic frequencies that shouldn't have been possible for human vocal cords. "Interface successful. Defense grid coming online. Recommend immediate evacuation of all personnel to minimum safe distance." The response came back filled with excitement and relief. "Confirmed, Commander. We're reading massive energy spikes from the planetary grid. Your vital signs are unusual, but stable. How do you feel?" Marcus considered the question. How did he feel? His consciousness now existed simultaneously at a dozen different levels of reality. He could perceive the individual quantum states of matter around him while also sensing the cosmic background radiation that permeated the galaxy. He was still fundamentally himself, but that self had been transformed into something capable of wielding power that could reshape worlds. Different, he replied simply. But ready. As the defense grid reached initial activation levels, Marcus began to understand the true scope of what the ancient builders had created. The system wasn't just a weapon, it was a reality anchor, designed to maintain the stability of local spacetime against entities that existed partially outside normal physics. The Void Swarm didn't just consume matter and energy, it unraveled the quantum foundations that allowed matter and energy to exist in the first place. Through his enhanced perception, Marcus tracked the evacuation of Zephyrian civilians from the most vulnerable areas of the planet. Queen Lyralii had organized the withdrawal with impressive efficiency, moving population centers into specially shielded areas that would provide some protection from the exotic energies about to be unleashed. But many chose to remain in their homes, trusting that the ancient defenses would protect them. The responsibility was overwhelming. Millions of lives depended on his ability to master technology that challenged the basic laws of physics. But Marcus had always thrived under pressure, and his enhanced consciousness was already adapting to the system's operational requirements. He began running diagnostic sequences through the defense network, awakening weapon platforms that had slept for millennia. Massive crystalline cannons emerged from concealed positions across the planet's surface, their targeting systems interfacing directly with his expanded awareness. Shield generators spanning entire continents hummed to life, creating overlapping barriers of force that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. But it was the primary defense system that truly demonstrated the builder's genius. Deep within the planet's core, Marcus activated arrays that could manipulate the fundamental constants of reality within a limited area. Space itself became malleable under his control, allowing him to create zones where the Void Swarm's reality-eating properties would be neutralized. Grid status approaching full power, he reported, his voice now carrying undertones that seemed to resonate with the planet's crystalline core. All primary systems responding to neural commands. Ready to engage hostile entity upon arrival. Above ground, the evacuation continued with desperate urgency. Ships streamed away from Zephyr Prime carrying those civilians who had chosen flight over faith in the ancient defenses. But millions remained, trusting their lives to the hope that one human warrior could master technology beyond current understanding. Marcus felt their presence as points of light in his expanded consciousness, each life precious beyond measure. He thought of his sister's words about choosing a normal life, about the safety of returning to Earth and farming. But this was his purpose, he realized. This was why he had always felt driven to help others, why he couldn't walk away from those in need. The neural integration was complete, but the transformation continued on a cellular level. Marcus could feel his physical form adapting to contain the energies flowing through him. His DNA was being rewritten by forces that treated biological evolution as a minor inconvenience to be overcome. He was becoming something new, something that existed at the intersection of human consciousness and cosmic power. Commander Kane, Queen Lyralii's voice came through the communication system, now carried by quantum entanglement rather than conventional radio waves. We're detecting the Void Swarm's approach vector. Engagement in approximately 2 hours. Marcus extended his awareness outward, perceiving the approaching entity through sensors that operated beyond the electromagnetic spectrum. What he saw confirmed his worst fears. The Void Swarm wasn't just large, it was intelligent, adapting its approach based on the defense network's activation. It had consumed countless worlds before Zephyr Prime, and each victory had taught it new strategies for overcoming resistance. But the ancient builders had faced similar entities, and their weapons had been designed specifically to counter such threats. Marcus began charging the primary cannon arrays, drawing power from the planet's core through conduits that channeled energies comparable to stellar fusion. The process was delicate. Too much power too quickly could destabilize the planetary crust, while too little would fail to penetrate the Void Swarm's reality distortion fields. As he worked, Marcus became aware of something unexpected. The ancient defense system contained archived memories of previous battles, recordings left by operators who had faced similar threats. He wasn't the first to undergo this transformation, wasn't the first to sacrifice his humanity to defend the innocent. The knowledge was both comforting and terrifying, showing him glimpses of the vast and ongoing struggle between order and entropy that played out across cosmic timescales. All stations, he broadcast to the surface team, his enhanced voice carrying authority that seemed to resonate with reality itself. Void swarm contact imminent. Recommend final evacuation protocols for all non-essential personnel. Above him, the last evacuation ships departed Zephyr Prime's atmosphere. Queen Lyralii and a skeleton crew remained in the orbital command center, determined to witness the fate of their world. Through the planet's sensor network, Marcus watched the final preparations as his people prepared to trust their survival to forces beyond their comprehension. The Void Swarm emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the system, and Marcus got his first direct view of the entity that had terrified the galaxy into silence. It was vast beyond description, a writhing mass of absolute darkness that seemed to consume light itself. Tendrils of nothingness reached out ahead of the main mass, testing the boundaries of local spacetime and finding them stable enough to support its advance. The entity paused at the system's edge, as if sensing the awakened defense grid. For a moment that stretched into eternity, Predator and Protector assessed each other across the void. Then, the Void Swarm began its final approach, and Marcus Kane prepared to discover whether one human sacrifice could turn the tide against cosmic hunger. The battle for Zephyr Prime was about to begin. The Void Swarm's assault on Zephyr Prime began not with conventional weapons, but with an attack on reality itself. As the entity approached the planet's outer defensive perimeter, Marcus felt the fundamental constants of physics beginning to fluctuate within the swarm's influence. Gravity became inconsistent, electromagnetic forces weakened, and the strong nuclear force that held atoms together started to unravel. Through his expanded consciousness, Marcus perceived the attack on multiple levels simultaneously. The Void Swarm wasn't just a physical threat, it was a cancer in the fabric of spacetime, spreading its influence like a cosmic infection. Where its tendrils touched the quantum foam that underlied reality, that foundation simply ceased to exist, leaving behind regions where matter could not form and energy could not propagate. Initiating primary defense protocols, Marcus announced, his transformed voice resonating through dimensional frequencies that carried to every corner of the system. All personnel maintain safe distance. Reality distortion effects detected. The first line of defense activated as the Void Swarm encountered the crystalline barriers Marcus had erected at the system's edge. These weren't physical shields in any conventional sense, but zones where the laws of physics had been reinforced and stabilized. The ancient builders had learned that fighting entities like the Void Swarm required not just weapons, but a fundamental restructuring of local spacetime to prevent reality decay. The contact between barrier and swarm created effects that challenged Marcus's enhanced perception. Energy patterns that shouldn't have been able to exist manifested as twisted geometries that hurt to observe directly. The Void Swarm tested the barriers methodically, probing for weaknesses while sending scout tendrils to map the full extent of the defense network. Marcus responded by adjusting the barrier frequencies, using knowledge downloaded from the ancient archives. Each modification required delicate manipulation of forces that operated beyond normal physics, channeled through his transformed nervous system and the crystalline conduits that now extended throughout his body. The process was exhausting on levels he hadn't known existed, but he maintained focus through sheer determination. Surface command, he reported, maintaining the communication link despite the reality distortions. Initial contact successful. Barriers holding, but swarm is adapting faster than projected. Preparing secondary defense measures. Queen Lyralii's response came through the quantum entanglement channels, her voice tight with controlled anxiety. Understood, Commander. Sensor readings show massive energy fluctuations throughout the system. Are you still yourself? The question gave Marcus pause. Was he still himself? His consciousness now spanned multiple dimensions, his perception encompassed quantum and cosmic scales simultaneously, and his body had been fundamentally altered by energies that redefined biological possibility. But, at his core, the drive to protect innocent life remained unchanged. I'm what I need to be, he replied simply. The Void Swarm's probing attacks intensified as it identified weaknesses in the barrier network. Marcus found himself fighting a three-dimensional chess game where each move required manipulating forces that could reshape matter at the subatomic level. The entity learned from each contact, adapting its approach with intelligence that spoke of eons of experience consuming worlds. But Marcus was learning too. The ancient archives contained tactical data from hundreds of similar battles, and his enhanced consciousness was processing this information at superhuman speeds. He began to understand the Void Swarm's attack patterns, recognizing the rhythmic pulses it used to destabilize local reality before launching major assaults. When the swarm finally committed to a full attack, the violence was beyond anything Marcus had imagined. The entity threw itself against the crystalline barriers with the force of collapsed stars, sending shockwaves through spacetime that threatened to tear apart the fabric of local reality. The barriers held, but Marcus could feel the strain they were placing on the planet's energy matrix. Switching to offensive protocols, he announced, beginning the delicate process of charging the planet's primary weapon systems. The ancient builders had created cannons capable of firing beams of pure creation energy, streams of force that could rebuild reality in areas where the Void Swarm had caused decay. But using such weapons required precise timing and massive power expenditures that would drain the planetary grid. The first cannon fired as the Void Swarm penetrated the outer barrier layer. The beam of creation energy struck the entity's leading edge, causing an explosion of conflicting forces that warped spacetime in a sphere several thousand kilometers across. For a moment, the Void Swarm recoiled, its advance halted by the impact of forces designed to counter its reality-consuming nature. But the victory was temporary. The entity adapted to the attack pattern within minutes, developing new approaches that minimized its exposure to the creation beams. Marcus found himself forced to constantly adjust his tactics, using the weapon systems in combinations the builders had never intended. Swarm showing adaptive behavior beyond projected parameters, he reported, firing coordinated volleys from multiple cannon arrays. Switching to asymmetric engagement protocols. The battle evolved into a deadly dance across multiple dimensions. Marcus used the planet's reality anchors to create pockets of hyperstable space that the Void Swarm couldn't penetrate, while simultaneously launching reality bombs that would restore areas already consumed by the entity's advance. Each exchange required split-second timing and energy expenditures that pushed the defense grid toward its operational limits. Through it all, Marcus maintained awareness of the billions of Zephyrians whose lives depended on his success. Their presence in his expanded consciousness served as an anchor, reminding him why he endured the agony of channeling forces that were slowly burning away his human biology. Each life was precious, each family worth the sacrifice he was making. The Void Swarm's next assault targeted the defense grid directly, sending probability tendrils through dimensional shortcuts to attack the weapon systems from within. Marcus found himself fighting battles that took place inside the crystalline conduits themselves, using his transformed consciousness to repel invasions that existed more as mathematical concepts than physical threats. The strain was immense. Marcus could feel his neural pathways overloading as they carried energies that exceeded their design parameters even after the ancient modifications. The Veltar battle stims were the only thing preventing complete neural burnout, but even those enhancements had their limits. Grid power at 60% and falling, he announced, his voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to echo from other dimensions. Swarm approaching critical engagement range. Initiating final defense protocols. The final protocols represented the ancient builder's ultimate weapon, a reality storm that would restructure local spacetime to make it fundamentally incompatible with entities like the Void Swarm. But activating such a storm required channeling the entire output of Zephyr Prime's core through a single consciousness, a process that would almost certainly destroy the operator. As Marcus began the activation sequence, he felt the weight of every choice that had brought him to this moment. His decision to leave Earth, his willingness to defy orders to save lives, his choice to answer Queen Lyraliai's call when no one else would respond. Each decision had been made for the same reason, because someone had to be willing to stand against the darkness. The reality storm began building in the quantum substrate around Zephyr Prime, creating waves of probability that would rewrite the fundamental laws of local physics. The Void Swarm sensed the gathering power and launched a desperate assault, throwing everything it possessed against the defense grid in an attempt to prevent the storm's completion. Marcus fought back with weapons that redefined the possible, firing beams of concentrated time that aged portions of the swarm into non-existence while creating zones of space where entropy operated in reverse. The battle raged across 11 dimensions simultaneously, each exchange threatening to tear apart the fabric of local reality. But the Void Swarm was desperate now, and desperate entities were dangerous beyond measure. It began sacrificing portions of itself to create probability cascades designed to destabilize the reality storm before it could reach full power. Marcus found himself forced to choose between maintaining the storm's charge and protecting the planet's surface from reality distortions that could erase entire continents. The choice was no choice at all. Marcus diverted power from the reality storm to reinforce the planet's stability, accepting the tactical disadvantage in exchange for protecting the lives below. The Void Swarm pressed its advantage, sending tendrils of nothingness toward the planet's surface while Marcus struggled to rebuild the storm's charge. It was in that moment of desperate struggle that Marcus felt something unexpected, other presences joining his consciousness through the defense grid. The archived memories of previous operators weren't just recordings, they were actual consciousness fragments preserved within the system itself. Warriors from dozens of species who had made the same choice he was making, their sacrifice echoing across millennia to support him in this crucial moment. Together, they channeled power beyond what any single mind could control. The reality storm reached critical mass in seconds rather than hours, creating a wave of restructured spacetime that swept outward from Zephyr Prime at faster-than-light speeds. Where the wave encountered the Void Swarm, the entity's reality-consuming properties were neutralized, leaving behind only normal matter and energy that dispersed harmlessly into space. The Void Swarm's death scream echoed across dimensional boundaries, a sound of pure entropy that would have driven normal minds to madness. But Marcus and his ancient allies endured it, watching as the entity that had terrorized the galaxy dissolved into component particles that no longer possessed the coherence to threaten reality itself. As the immediate threat passed, Marcus felt the other consciousness fragments fading back into the archives, their duty complete. He was alone again, but the memory of their sacrifice remained, a reminder that he was part of a legacy stretching back to the dawn of galactic civilization. "Surface Command," he announced, his voice now barely recognizable as human but still carrying the core personality that defined him. "Hostile entity neutralized. Zephyr Prime secure. Defense grid transitioning to standby mode." The celebration that erupted from the orbital command center was audible even through the quantum entanglement channels. Queen Lyraliai's voice carried joy and relief in equal measure as she responded. "Commander Kane, you did it. You actually did it. The Void Swarm is gone." Marcus wanted to share in their celebration, but the battle had cost him more than he had anticipated. The reality storm's activation had burned out vast sections of his enhanced nervous system, and the quantum forces he had channeled were continuing to transform his biology in ways that defied medical understanding. He was alive, but he was no longer entirely sure what that meant. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "there are some things we need to discuss. The interface process has changed me more than originally projected. I'm not certain I can safely return to normal space." The silence that followed carried the weight of realization. Marcus had saved Zephyr Prime, but the cost of that salvation was still being calculated. The transformation that had made him capable of wielding the ancient weapons might have also made him incompatible with normal existence. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today, the children of Zephyr Prime would live to see another sunrise, and sometimes that was enough. The immediate battle was won, but Marcus Kane's greatest challenge was yet to come, finding a way to live with the consequences of becoming something more than human in service to those who needed protection. 3 months after the Void Swarm's defeat, Marcus Kane stood at the observation deck of the newly constructed Guardian Station, watching ships from across the galaxy approach Zephyr Prime. The irony wasn't lost on him. Now that the crisis had passed, now that the impossible had been accomplished, every major power in the galaxy wanted to discuss alliances, trade agreements, and technology exchanges with the world they had abandoned to its fate. His reflection in the transparent aluminum was barely recognizable as human. The transformation that had made him capable of wielding the ancient weapons had continued long after the battle ended, restructuring his biology in ways that Dr. Lysera and her team were still trying to understand. His skin held a faint luminescence similar to the Zephyrians, but with an underlying pattern that seemed to shift based on his emotional state. His eyes had changed most dramatically, becoming windows to a consciousness that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Commander Kane, Queen Lyreliai's voice came from behind him, using the title she insisted on maintaining despite his repeated protestations. The Galactic Council delegation has arrived. They're requesting an audience. Marcus turned from the window, noting the careful distance the Queen maintained. Not from fear, he had learned, but from a deep awareness of the energies that still flowed through him. Even in his current state, with the defense grid powered down to minimal levels, his transformed nervous system channeled forces that could disrupt sensitive electronics and biological systems. "Let me guess," Marcus said, his voice carrying harmonic frequencies that seemed to resonate with the station's crystalline infrastructure. "They want to discuss the mutual benefits of establishing permanent research facilities to study the ancient technology." Queen Lyreliai's expression confirmed his suspicions. "They've also brought formal apologies for their initial response to our call for aid. Apparently, there were communication delays and technical difficulties that prevented them from responding sooner." Of course there were. Marcus had expected this response. Now that the Void Swarm was gone and the defense grid had proven its effectiveness, the same civilizations that had ignored Zephyr Prime's desperate pleas were eager to share in the benefits of ancient technology. "What do you want me to tell them?" "The truth," the Queen replied simply. "That the defense system is no longer just a planetary protection grid. It's evolved into something else entirely, something that requires a guardian rather than an operator." The truth was more complex than either of them could have anticipated. The neural interface that had transformed Marcus into a weapon capable of defeating the Void Swarm had also made him a permanent part of the defense network. His consciousness was now distributed throughout the crystalline conduits that ran through Zephyr Prime's core, making him simultaneously human and something far more. He could exist in normal space for brief periods, but his primary existence was now tied to the ancient technology. More importantly, he had discovered that the Void Swarm was not unique. The ancient archives contained references to dozens of similar entities, cosmic predators that emerged from the spaces between realities to consume entire civilizations. The defense grid that protected Zephyr Prime was just one node in a galaxy-spanning network that the builders had created to serve as early warning systems and response platforms. Commander, Dr. Lysera approached with her usual combination of scientific curiosity and medical concern. "We've completed the analysis of the transmission data from the outer rim sensors. There are confirmed sightings of reality distortions in the Andromeda sector that match Void Swarm signatures." Marcus felt his enhanced awareness automatically extend toward the coordinates Dr. Lysera indicated, his consciousness touching the edge of ancient sensor networks that spanned intergalactic distances. What he found confirmed his worst fears. Another entity, perhaps even larger than the one they had defeated, was approaching inhabited space from the direction of the galactic core. "Time to arrival," he asked, already beginning calculations based on the entity's apparent velocity and trajectory. "Approximately 18 months at current speed," Dr. Lysera replied. "But, Commander, the inhabited systems in its path include the Korathi homeworld and 7 other major population centers." Marcus considered the implications. The Korathi Empire, which had claimed technical difficulties when Zephyr Prime called for aid, was about to face the same threat they had refused to help combat. The irony would have been amusing if billions of lives weren't at stake. "Your Majesty," he said to Queen Lyreliai, "I believe it's time for that conversation with the Galactic Council delegation. But not the one they're expecting." The meeting took place in the Guardian Station's primary conference center, a chamber designed to accommodate representatives from multiple species while providing the electromagnetic shielding necessary for Marcus to participate without disrupting their technology. The delegation was impressive by political standards. The Korathi Fleet Admiral who had authorized the technical difficulties response to Zephyr Prime's call, the Nexus Prime Trade Minister who had dismissed heroic gestures as pointless, and representatives from a dozen other major powers. Marcus entered the chamber in his current form, making no effort to conceal the extent of his transformation. The effect on the assembled delegates was immediate and unmistakable. These beings had come expecting to negotiate with a planetary government that had somehow acquired advanced weapons. Instead, they found themselves facing something that challenged their understanding of what was possible. "Honorable delegates," Queen Lyreliai began the proceedings with diplomatic formality, "we thank you for your presence and your expressions of support for our world's recovery from the recent crisis. Fleet Admiral Korath of the Korathi Empire leaned forward, his scaled features set in what Marcus recognized as an attempt at authoritative posturing. Queen Lyralii, the Korathi Empire is prepared to offer significant resources to assist in the study and development of the defensive technologies your world has deployed. Our scientists could help unlock the full potential of these ancient systems. Marcus allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as he responded. Admiral, 3 months ago your empire claimed technical difficulties prevented you from responding to this world's call for aid. Now you want to study the technology that saved the lives you were unwilling to help protect. The Admiral's posture shifted uncomfortably. Commander Kane, if that is still your preferred title, you must understand that military decisions require careful consideration of strategic implications. The Korathi fleet could not commit resources without understanding the full scope of the threat. The full scope, Marcus repeated, his enhanced voice carrying undertones that seemed to resonate with reality itself. Let me share some strategic implications with you, Admiral. 3 days ago, our long-range sensors detected another entity similar to the one we defeated approaching from the galactic core. Current trajectory puts it on course for your homeworld in approximately 18 months. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus could feel the shock and fear radiating from the assembled delegates as they processed this information. The Nexus Prime Minister was the first to recover, his crystalline form pulsing with rapid communication patterns. If this intelligence is accurate, the minister said carefully, then, the threat extends far beyond any single world. The galactic community must coordinate a unified response. Exactly, Marcus agreed. Which brings us to why you're really here. You want access to the ancient technology because you've realized that conventional military forces are useless against entities that can unmake reality itself. But, here's what you need to understand, this technology isn't something you can simply study and replicate. It requires a living interface, someone willing to sacrifice their humanity to become part of the defense network. Admiral Koratha's expression showed the first hints of understanding. You're saying that operating these weapons requires the kind of transformation you've undergone. I'm saying more than that, Marcus replied, allowing his consciousness to extend slightly beyond its normal boundaries. The effect was visible as subtle reality distortions rippled through the chamber, causing displays to flicker and gravity to fluctuate momentarily. I'm saying that each defense node requires a guardian, someone willing to become something more than their original species to protect others. And, based on the approaching threat, we're going to need multiple nodes activated across the galaxy. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical force. They had come expecting to negotiate access to powerful weapons. Instead, they were being told that using those weapons required volunteers willing to undergo the same transformation Marcus had experienced, becoming something beyond their original biology in service to galactic defense. Queen Lyralii stepped forward to address the stunned silence. The ancient archives indicate that the galaxy once hosted dozens of active defense nodes, each operated by a guardian from a different species. The network was designed to provide early warning and coordinated response to entities that threaten the fundamental structure of reality. But, over time, as the immediate threats diminished, the guardians died and the nodes went dormant. Until now, Marcus continued. The Void Swarm's attack on Zephyr Prime was a scouting probe, sent ahead to test our defenses. Its destruction has likely triggered response protocols in other entities, drawing them toward inhabited space. We have perhaps 2 years before multiple threats converge on population centers throughout the galaxy. Trade Minister Vex of Nexus Prime's crystalline form pulsed with rapid calculation patterns. You're proposing that representatives from multiple species undergo this transformation to operate additional defense nodes. I'm not proposing anything, Marcus replied. I'm stating a fact. Without active guardians, the defense network cannot function. Without the defense network, entities like the Void Swarm will consume every inhabited world in the galaxy. You have a choice: find volunteers willing to make the sacrifice, or watch your civilizations be erased from existence. Admiral Koratha's tactical mind was clearly processing the strategic realities. How many nodes would need to be activated? Marcus consulted the ancient archives through his neural interface, accessing star charts and threat assessment algorithms that predated current civilization. Based on current entity movement patterns and projected threat vectors, we would need a minimum of 12 active nodes to provide adequate coverage. Optimal defensive posture would require 24. The numbers fell on the assembled delegates like a physical weight. They were being asked to find 24 individuals willing to sacrifice their humanity to protect worlds that might not even know they needed protection. In many ways, it was an impossible request. But Marcus had learned something important about impossible choices during his time on Zephyr Prime. Sometimes the right choice was also the necessary choice, even when it seemed beyond the realm of possibility. Honorable delegates, he continued, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had already made the ultimate sacrifice, I understand what I'm asking. But consider the alternative. Every inhabited world in the galaxy is under threat from entities that exist partially outside normal reality. Your fleets, your weapons, your alliances mean nothing against opponents that can simply unwrite the laws of physics and local space. Fleet Admiral Korath was the first to speak, his military training apparently helping him process the tactical realities more quickly than the others. Commander Kane, if the Korathi Empire were to identify suitable candidates for this transformation, would you be willing to assist in the process? I would be honored to, Marcus replied. But understand that this isn't a military command structure. Guardians operate independently, coordinating through the network itself. You're not recruiting soldiers, you're seeking individuals willing to become something beyond their original nature in service to all life. Over the following weeks, the implications of Marcus's revelation spread throughout galactic civilization like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. Some species responded with denial, others with panic, but a few began the difficult process of identifying individuals who might be suitable for Guardian transformation. The Veltar warrior clans surprised everyone by immediately volunteering 3 of their most experienced fighters, viewing the transformation as the ultimate expression of the warrior's path. The meditative monks of the Spiral Nebula colonies requested detailed information about the consciousness expansion aspects of the process. Even the usually cautious Federation of Earth began quiet discussions about potential candidates among their military and scientific personnel. But it was the unexpected volunteers that moved Marcus most deeply. Dr. Lysera submitted her own application for consideration, stating that her medical training and existing knowledge of the transformation process made her an ideal candidate. Captain Threll of the Veltar clans formally requested permission to undergo the Guardian transformation, saying he regretted not joining Marcus's original mission to Zephyr Prime. Most surprising was the message that arrived from Marcus's sister Sarah on Earth. Marcus, her recorded voice said, I've been watching the news feeds about what you've become and what you're asking others to do. I understand now why you couldn't come home to be a farmer. Some people are called to till fields and grow crops. Others are called to stand guard against the darkness. I'm proud of my brother, the Guardian. As Marcus stood once again at the observation deck of Guardian Station, watching ships arrive from across the galaxy with potential candidates for transformation, he reflected on the strange journey that had brought him to this point. He had started as a disgraced soldier drinking alone in his space station cantina. Now he was something more than human, serving as an anchor point for a defense network that protected all life in the galaxy. The transformation had cost him his original humanity, but it had given him something greater, the ability to ensure that children throughout the galaxy would grow up in a universe where hope could triumph over entropy. Not through violence or conquest, but through the willingness of individuals to sacrifice themselves for the protection of others. In the depths of space, ancient sensors detected new movements among entities that existed in the spaces between realities. The war that Marcus had begun with his response to Queen Lyraliai's call was far from over. But, for the first time in millennia, the galaxy would face that war with Guardians standing watch, protectors willing to become something more than their original nature in service to all life. The message that had started it all echoed in Marcus's enhanced memory: when someone calls for help, you answer. Now that call was being answered not by one human warrior, but by representatives of dozens of species united in the recognition that some things were worth any sacrifice to protect. In the end, perhaps that was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, not advanced technology or superior weapons, but the simple, stubborn belief that every life was worth saving, and that someone had to be willing to stand guard in the darkness. Marcus Kane, guardian of Zephyr Prime and protector of the ancient defense network, stood watch as a new generation of guardians prepared to take their places in humanity's greatest legacy, the refusal to abandon hope when everyone else had given up. The galaxy would endure. The children would grow up safe. And, the Guardians would stand eternal watch against the darkness between the stars. Some calls for help, after all, deserve to be answered by heroes willing to become something more than human in service to all life.